Welcome to the Marcus Oldham College AgTalk Podcast. This series of podcasts focuses on the business management of Australian farms. G'day, my name is David Cornish. I am the Director for the Centre for the Study of AgriBusiness at Marcus Oldham College, an independent tertiary institution that has been producing the next generation of Australian farm managers for over 50 years. The focus of the podcast is to look at the question of what makes a farmer successful. Is it just luck, or do good farmers make their own luck through hard work and utilising good business decision-making processes? I hope you enjoy the discussion.
One of the main requests I get for the AgTalk podcast is for me to look more closely at northern pastoral systems. To help me with this request, it's my pleasure today to introduce Ian McLean to the AgTalk podcast. Ian is the Managing Director of Bush AgriBusiness, a professional service firm providing independent analysis and trusted insight into the pastoral businesses across northern and regional Australia. He grew up in the bush, doing primary school through the School of the Air before going to boarding school and then studying accounting at university. He moved to the Northern Territory in the early 2000s, initially doing station work, then working in an accounting firm. He then worked in training and extension with the Northern Territory DPI before moving to the NT Cattlemen's Association, working first in member services and project management, then later as executive officer. Ian's special interest is understanding and improving pastoral business performance from family-owned through to corporate scale. Ian holds a Master of Business Administration and is credited as a Chartered Agriculturalist by the Ag Institute of Australia. Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome Ian McLean today. And again, as I say, there's all an interest. So welcome, Ian.
Welcome, David. Thank you for having me.
Ian, I think what we start off with, and as I say, I had the pleasure of getting hold of the Australian Beef Report 2020 vision. And I say pleasure because it's really good to see what you've done in that book. And the thing that I love about it is that not only are you looking at the numbers, but you've got a couple of really interesting producers or successful producers involved in chatting about sort of insights and wisdom. It must have been a really interesting experience to put it together.
It was, and thank you for the feedback. It's something we're quite proud of. And yes, getting those leading producers' thoughts together on different topics was something that I found quite interesting and inspiring. There's a lot of wisdom or intellectual capital in the industry, and we thought it was important to try and capture that for all to learn from.
Mate, what I thought we'd start with is just a bit about your background. I gave a bit of an intro, and obviously you've started off as you did an accounting degree. You went up to Northern Territory, but what got you interested in the consulting business, and more particularly about sort of understanding the financial analysis or viability of pastoral operations?
Yes, Dave. Initially studied accounting because I was interested in applying it back to agriculture, and I worked in an accounting firm for a while and wasn't able to make that connection. And I was pretty fortunate about 15, 20 years ago in the Northern Territory to come across Phil Holmes, who's had a successful consulting career in Southern and Northern Australia, and started working with Phil, and was pretty fortunate to have him mentor me over the last 15 or so years, and that helped me take that initial interest in applying accounting or business principles back to agriculture, and be able to learn from him what he'd done in his career, and be able to carve out my own career in that area and create a business that focuses on helping agricultural businesses understand and improve their business performance.
Yeah, I think Phil's had a bit of influence on all of us, mate. There's nothing like Phil Holmes at a conference to get people riled up. It's always been good fun. But I think what he's got to say has got a lot of value to it.
Yes, yeah, indeed. And he likes to get a reaction out of people.
He likes stirring the pot, all right. So let's look at some of the sort of findings, general findings. And again, we'll sort of talk a bit about some of the findings, but I do recommend that people get hold of this if they are interested in not only what's happening within the pastoral industry, but it's the beef industry per se. But it's also, I think, really good to look at farm performance and cross-tabulate that with other industries. And even though you might not be in the cattle industry, I think there's some really good lessons that come out of that, because I think one of the things I'd like to start with is you generally talk about the three main factors to highly profitable cattle producers being scale, operation efficiency, and land not being overly expensive. I do like that third one because at the moment it's not too easy down this way. I don't know what it's like up your way. But let's talk about the first two. What do you mean by scale and operational efficiency?
So yeah, scale, what we've found looking at beef businesses across Australia is if they have operating scale and operating efficiency, they'll generate good profits. So operating scale is fundamentally about having a large enough scale. We measure that in animal units, but in southern areas it would apply, hectares would apply as well, in terms of having enough animal units to bring the overhead cost per animal down to a competitive level. So effectively economies of scale, and we've found that that's at around 2,000 to 3,000 AE, which doing sort of very quick sums is going to be 15,000 to 20,000 BSE for a business to be large enough to bring those costs down to a competitive level there. Otherwise, the fixed cost of the business, and most agricultural businesses are family businesses, and the biggest fixed cost is the family labour unit working in the business and the cost of running a homestead or a farm as well. If there's not many animals there, then it becomes very expensive per animal to do that. So that's operating scale. We found once a business has sufficient operating scale, more isn't necessarily better. It's one of those things that's important until it's not.
And I think that's a really important point. You do sort of go on to this concept around probably, let's just call it diseconomies of scale, where at some point the value you get from getting bigger isn't so much, if I could put it that way.
Yes, that's right. And that's an important thing. And for many businesses, if they are of scale and looking to improve, often improving their current operating efficiency may be a better way of doing that than simply getting bigger. And as you alluded to, land prices at the moment, I think everywhere, are such that it is very hard for people to do the sums rationally and justify the investment for expansion in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases. So operating efficiency is about doing what they do well. So for beef businesses, it's about having good herd productivity, herds that convert grass into beef quite efficiently. And it is surprising when we look at different businesses that may look similar from the outside, may have same looking cattle, same looking country, one will be much more effective at producing beef than the other. Just a few percentage points difference in reproductive rate, mortality rate, an extra 20 or 30 kilos in average sale weight makes a big difference in terms of the amount of beef that the businesses truck out over time. So that's a big part of operating efficiency. Another part of operating efficiency is targeting herd expenditure. One thing we've observed is the top performing producers nearly always spend less on their herds than the average producers, but they get more productivity. So that tells us that they're not just being tight and not spending money, but when they're spending discretionary money on their herd, they're making sure that it gives them a payback. And if it's not giving them a payback, they're not spending it. And the top performers tend to do that very well, whereas the average will spend more on their herd and get less. The other aspect of operating efficiency is having labour efficiency. Labour is one of the biggest cost drivers, if not the biggest cost driver in an agricultural business. So using it efficiently in terms of number of animal units that each labour unit runs is important in bringing those costs down. So the labour efficiency and scale are the two big drivers of what it costs per animal unit to run. So if a business has sufficient scale, a productive herd, well-targeted herd expenditure and good labour efficiency, it'll generally generate good profits through the full cycle. How that translates into profitability or ROA is a function of that land value which you alluded to.
Okay, so let's just stop there and let's, I suppose, wind back that operation efficiency, because we can look at the numbers and say what we see with better businesses is that they, as you say, their productivity is better through maybe better weaning rates and better production per kilos of beef coming off the property. Is that what we're talking about?
So the animal units are effectively a measure of grass eaten, so they're able to convert grass into beef more efficiently by having that higher weaning rate. So not as many dry animals that are just eating grass without producing a calf. They have heavier sale weights because those growing animals are more effective than breeding animals converting grass to beef. And they also have a lower mortality rate because dead animals have a pretty low sale weight.
Cool, mate. So you're going onto a farm. Say you're coming onto my place. What's the low-hanging fruit, I suppose what I'm trying to say is where do you think we can make our biggest bang for it? If you're going to the place, you can say, David, I want to see this, or what are you doing here? What is it from an operational perspective do you think that allows those farmers to create those better weight gains or better calving rates?
The first thing is just understanding the herd performance and herd numbers. One of the biggest bottlenecks in industry performance is just knowing how our herds are performing, even what our herd numbers are. And I think this is universal north and south, where we just don't have a good understanding of herd numbers. Might be able to pull a notebook out of the pocket and say we've got this many in that paddock.
Yeah.
But being what was our herd profile at the start of the year? Over the year, what was our natural increase, purchase, sales, deaths? What did we have at the end of the year? And having that all reconciled, the basic stock flow, which I presume you do a lot of with your students, having producers just do that, have that be accurate, match what's in the paddock, is a big bottleneck in performance. And modern historically, business has been able to get away without it, but I think modern businesses, there's no excuse to not have it. And without that, producers may not realise they have a productivity issue. In the north, there's been some good studies done on herd productivity, which has found that the weaning rate is in the 50s and 60s percent in a lot of places, and mortality rates are up to 10%. So there's a lot of lost potential there in kilos being produced through poor productivity. But if people are of the opinion that they're weaning 75 to 80%, and there are 2 to 3% mortality, which are the socially acceptable figures that are usually quoted, there's not an awareness that there's a problem. So I think that's the big challenge for the industry, is to get better at that.
And sorry for my ignorance here. I mean, on the cattle operation at home, we regularly pregnancy test, and again, we're a small block, so it's easy for us to do it. Is that part of the northern system? Regularly pregnancy tests? Are bulls put in for a certain period? How does that work? And does that matter?
It varies, David, across the board. There are areas where it is genuinely not possible for bulls to be removed.
Yep.
Logistically, and also the abundance of Mickeys being there if your bulls aren't there. But there's also people that we work with that do remove their bulls, and they're thousands of kilometres north of people that say it can't be done in their country. So there's some country where it can't be done, but in where it can't be done, there is an opportunity with setting up heifers to maybe try and control mate them on their first joining. Let the bull select the fertile ones and have them calving at the right time of year. There is still an opportunity. In terms of pregnancy testing, it is a very valuable tool, but it in itself doesn't increase fertility at all. It measures fertility. So there needs to be management through genetics, which is another big opportunity for people to select for more fertile genetics, and in management through the timing of calving, and also where possible, and also getting the weaners off so they're not taking too much of the body condition score out of the female there. And a lot of people are doing a lot in that area, but they are opportunities there.
So would you be saying that more profitable operations are removing their cattle, the calves as weaners at what age are we talking, or is it too hard to say?
It varies property to property, and also season to season. Obviously, if there's a failed season, people go in and move earlier, take them off lighter to maintain that body condition score on the cows. But yeah, if the calving is lined up reasonably well, and reasonably well for the north's a 3 to 4 month period, then it does make it easy to go in and take calves off and also manage those out-of-season calves as well.
And again, you talk about not only in the northern beef systems, you talk about beef systems per se, that there was the factors which we sort of started to cover off on here that are consistent no matter what type of beef system you're running or what region you're running it. And obviously the one important thing that you talk about, and we sort of, I suppose, covered a bit about, is the productive herds, that they're targeting their herd expenditure better. What's that mean? I mean, to me, and again, probably in the southern system, I've got a drench. Is it around feed? How are they targeting their expenditure better?
There's no recipe for it, but a lot of it comes down to fodder, supplementation, and animal health. Yep. They're not the only ones, but they're the key ones. Supplementation, $1 spent in the right area. For a lot of the north, that's phosphorus, and maybe urea during the dry season as well. A $1 spent in the right area can provide $2 or $3 back, but it's also pretty easy to pour $2 or $3 down the animal's throat and only get $1 back as well.
Yep.
So it's making sure that the supplementation is well targeted and adding to production, and also with animal health, doing the necessary animal health that has a good payback and not doing ones that do not. Fodder, I think, does relate to grazing management in terms of doing forage budgeting and matching stocking rate to carrying capacity. That's something that the better producers do well. The better producers have a more even herd. It's always going to be variable through seasonal variations, but the better producers are able to maintain numbers more evenly. Varies up and down, where the poorer performing producers, the herd numbers and performance is more erratic season to season, which we think is a function of grazing management. And then often fodder will need to be brought in as an intervention because the forage budgeting and the stocking rate wasn't set well earlier in the season. The better performers avoid having to have that feed intervention at times.
So again, because it always interests me, when we do our pasture measurements down here, I have those, well, I'll say phalaris, not ryegrass-based southern systems, mate, that you talk about in your book with clover, and it's usually consistent. It's hard enough me measuring pasture, I think, in a reasonably regular pasture mix. I would imagine that's pretty hard in the north. I mean, I've seen, when you look into an area and say, well, how much dry matter have I got in front of me, or how much feed have I got in front of me, and trying to match that with your stocking rates, I would have thought it would be a harder task up there, or is it just you've got to take a different approach?
I think you've just got to take a different approach. It is a challenge, and it can be quite complex, but at its simplest, it's matching supply and demand. What feed is available, what feed needs at the end of the year, what animals do you have, what do they eat? The same approach in the south that they've been doing, and it's not easy, but some producers do it very well, and some do it almost intuitively too. And I know we do like to make sure we measure things, but just over time they have an understanding. Yep. A certain season, a body of feed at the start of the season will carry what their place will do and adjust their numbers accordingly, but also important to measure it. But yeah, it is a challenge, but my approach is that, running a multi-million-dollar business in any industry has its challenges and requires specialised skills, and this is one of those areas.
Yeah, because you talk about, interesting, taking from a southern perspective, we're always trying to maximise our stocking rates, or DSC per hectares, or AEs per hectares, I should say, mate. I'll convert that for you, per hectare. But there were some really interesting comments in that about that maybe it's not stocking rates. Pushing stocking rates in some of these systems is, from a sustainability perspective, isn't great. In fact, some of the better systems, and again, this came out, I think it goes back to the man we were talking about before, Phil Holmes's work, that it's actually about getting efficiencies in getting a sustainable stocking rate. Am I making sense there?
You are, and that's the distinction between the southern systems and the northern systems. Unfortunately, we don't have a clear line on the map marking where one stops and one starts. But in the northern system, stocking rate isn't a profit driver. The productive capacity or the carrying capacity of the country is the limit, and it's about knowing that, running, and the way we sum it up is for producers to run as many as they can, but no more than they should. If there is an environmental constraint being the carrying capacity, then the focus becomes per animal performance. If that stocking rate is exceeded for longer periods, it does cause a decline in land condition, and we can't, on the extensive operations, economically come in and do pasture renovation or fertilising that can be done in the south. So that pasture base needs to be maintained and appropriately stocked.
Yeah, that fragility of the system with regards to around pasture and maintaining that, because it seemed like if you pushed it too hard and it fell over, it takes a lot to get it back.
That's right, and there's been some very good research done. A number of sites across the north. One of them is Mombiana, which we refer to in the report in the chapter on managing the natural resource base, and that's shown that appropriately stocking produces a better economic result than heavy stocking.
Yep. So one of the interesting things too was when we're looking at these people you talk to, I should say people, leaders in probably the cattle industry, about some of the questions you asked them. And I'd be interested in your thoughts of what you gained from those discussions. And again, I really suggest that people get hold of the book and read the individual things, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to get a summary of some of those things. And one of the issues that I have, especially when I'm teaching my students coming to Marcus to start off with, and they might be starting to think I'm just a grumpy old bugger now, Ian, but it's the myth. It's the myths that I've seen and have been dealing with 40 years of my life in agriculture that seem to get into this system, get into agriculture, and you sort of talk about because of the huge variability in the industry allows some of these things to grow. And what were some of the leading myths that some of your leading cattle producers were talking about? And more importantly, how did they actually sort of deal with them or come to think about how I should look at this and research it and do some work on it before I make a decision on it?
Yeah, you're right. A lot of myths permeate agriculture. Some are pretty harmless, others less so. And I suppose one of the characteristics that I think is essential for a top performing producer is critical thinking skills, to be able to fully evaluate things, ask tough questions of people providing information to them, whether they be consultants or researchers, and be able to undertake an assessment of it and weigh it up for themselves. So I think that's a key skill there, and that's something that did come through with those responses we got from the pastoral panel and the questions we asked there, and the myths around more animals are better, or chasing price instead of weight, and not being able to address fertility and things like that. We had good examples from producers who had busted the myths on that, and to me, it gave a pretty inspirational insight into how they think about things, how they approach problems and business management. And every time I reread that chapter, I get a big dose of enthusiasm.
The other thing was risk, and it's something that I think we people mention. We love talking about the term risk, but actually, what is it and how we deal with it is something that there's a gap. So I thought there was some good stuff on that too.
Yes, I agree, and I do agree that risk is talked about, but I think it's something that some do very well, but there are a lot of opportunities for improvement in agriculture and in improving that risk management, particularly, personally, I think around climatic risk over time. But yeah, that was I suppose part of the purpose of that pastoral panel was to get those perspectives and experience from people that are out there managing it.
Yep. Now, the buzzword sustainability. What does it mean? What's your definition? Because I've given up.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from. I don't like the word sustainability in some ways, because I think the industry gets beaten around the head with it unfairly. but I haven't been able to come up with a better word. And our approach has been that if it's well defined, then it can be used. And that's what we've attempted to do in this, and also the previous report has defined sustainability, which is, it's not just about environmental sustainability, it's economic sustainability and also human resource sustainability, but for the business to be able to achieve a good economic return on the capital base without running down the environmental base, and also allowing intellectual capital of the people to flourish. If that occurs, I think that's a sustainable business and a sustainable industry.
Yeah, I agree. The triple bottom line approach, I think we've got to take all these things into consideration. And again, especially, I think sometimes we leave the community factors out of it. And coming from a small town, you certainly know the effect of when businesses move out of that town, what it has on the ripple effect through the community.
Yep.
Mate, let's get into some numbers. Can we get into some numbers?
We can.
Yeah, again, I'm understanding it's not. Now, I've got to say that I can't go past the comment you made about southern versus northern systems, people. Two things, south of the Murray, north of the Murray. One of them about the type of goal squares we have. And I just want to remind you that you're actually talking to me from the heart of Aussie rules country now, given that all our teams have now moved up there. So, mate, you're going to have to get used to it.
Oh, we are. Very slowly. It's being forced upon us. But anyway, it's good to have them up here.
Yeah, no, as I say, I'd like to be up there myself, to be honest. We're doing two things down here. We do two things very well. You'll be pleased to know. It rains and we're in lockdown.
Yes.
Okay, so when I'm looking at a northern system versus a top 25 system, and again, I'm just looking at the table here. The obvious thing that strikes me, first of all, is obviously they're bigger. We're talking about a gross profit of 960 versus 453,000. So generally that they're running a larger scale. But if I'm reading between the lines, is that there's an optimum level there, and it's not overboard. Would that be right?
It is, and when we look at just the broad top versus the average, scale is a big factor. When we do break it up by herd size, those are the same herd size that perform better are those that have that better herd productivity, more targeted herd expenditure, better labour efficiency. And the herd size cohort showed this well, where even those with less than 800 head, the top performers aren't making a profit there. So scale is a big factor,
yep.
And it is a constraint for businesses, and a lot of the population, both north and south, scale is a major issue. Now, where it pains to say that doesn't mean that it can't be a successful business. It can, it just may not be a full-time venture. It may be a 2 or 3 day a week job, and there's another job to bring income into the house. And if you're off doing something else, and that also reduces the running costs of the business as well.
I think one of the interesting analyses that you've got in there, when you break it down to it on an AE basis too, is that if you look at the difference between gross profit, so it's 198 versus 212. Yes, there's some difference there. You look at enterprise expenses, it's $44 versus 37. Yes, there's a difference there, a bit more difference. And that leads up to the gross margin being more, but really where the bigger one is in the overhead expenses. They're almost half in the larger operations. So again, that sort of concept around being able to spread your overheads over more stock numbers is a pretty important factor.
That's right, and that's something that does keep coming through. But we are at pains to say it's not just scale. There are some very big businesses out there that are not making a profit or running at a loss because they don't have that operating efficiency. It is you do need both. Having just one isn't sufficient.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's the important factor here, Ian. I couldn't agree more. Is that scale? Scale isn't the be all and end all. In fact, as I say, we see diseconomies of scale, and I've worked in some of my other hats on, and just because of the administration add-ons, especially with Sydney or Melbourne offices, it can actually increase your cost of operation and significantly reduce your EBIT.
That's right. Yes.
So, Ian, in summary. So what makes, if you are sitting down with young students today and saying, listen, X, Y, and Z, these are the things that you need to focus on in a productive, profitable northern system. What would you say to them? What would be the 5 things you'd say? Listen, you need to do these things.
Firstly, I think it's about attitude. They need to have an attitude to want to improve and want to continuously improve, and not think that they're able to continue coasting through. They need to be curious and think critically, be able to seek out information, but also be able to effectively weigh up and assess that information critically coming in. They need to understand the fundamentals for their business at their location, and it is different across locations, and it's different with different businesses, breeding versus growing versus lot feeding, bullock versus weaner, and that sort of thing. But generally, focusing on producing kilos out the gate is the biggest profit driver there is. Focusing on per animal performance more than the number of animals, looking at the labour efficiency, targeting their herd expenditure, and then actually measuring their performance, understanding how they're going, what are the strengths in their operation for them to capitalise on and build on, what are the areas for improvement that they can use to do that. And that's a continual process to understand their performance and continuously improve it. If they do all of that, then they're in with a good shot of having a sustainable business, if that's defined well.
On that note, I'd like to say thank you very much for participating today, and hopefully I can get you back on in future, so that when we need the voice from the north, I can rely on you to give us some good feedback.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to talking again.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's Marcus AgTalk podcast. Please, any feedback on the series would be greatly appreciated. You can either leave a message on this site or email me at cornish@marcusoldham.vic.edu.au. Stay tuned to next week's podcast as we continue to explore farm management from an Australian perspective.